Welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name's 𝐬𝐝𝐫𝐞.
I'm Ben.
Welcome to the show.
And I'm Michael.
Oh, we know you.
I've been instructed, 𝐬𝐝𝐫's been trying to get me to call you Dr. McGregor this whole morning and in hopes of throwing me off. I don't know what his plan is here, but we're really excited to have you on the show.
Not Irish, but Polish and Russian, I believe. Yeah, so there's lots of, maybe Grigorsky would be closer than.
Oh, I see. Okay. I do have a question about you and your family actually here. So I feel as though I remember hearing you talk about on a podcast. Everyone knows kind of the story of your grandmother and Dr. Pritikin, but I kind of remember you discussing your parents a little bit, which I hadn't heard as much, and maybe being involved in some activism as you were growing up. And I'm wondering, is that correct?
Yeah.
And what kind of influence has that had on you?
Oh, had a huge influence. So both my parents were very active in the civil rights movement. Both had big FBI files, I'm happy to say. Both arrested many a time. I have a picture on my wall of my mom getting dragged away and arrested at a famous protest at Downstate Medical in Brooklyn. In fact, I went and the only reason I went to interview at this medical school in Brooklyn was so I could tell them the story of my mom being arrested for trying to prevent the building that I was then sitting in because they were using an all-white union labor force. Anyway, yeah, so they were very active and passed that along to me, and so I wanted to, I had a passion to try to do good in the world. And so, look, you can do that you could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be, there's all sorts of ways you can do good in the world. And this is a path I've chosen, but I definitely, they had a big influence.
𝐬𝐝𝐫, growing up in Brooklyn, do you know that building?
It was just Downstate Medical, the big Downstate Medical building. Anyway,
No.
my dad was Queens, mom Brooklyn.
Okay. I want to ask you a little bit about kind of getting more into your background. So now you go on these speaking tours, you go to talk to large groups of people. I was on the 𝐬𝐶 2025, and the buzz when you would get up there was pretty electric. And I would say you're a very charismatic speaker. So I'm wondering, is that something that's always kind of come naturally to you, or is that something like a skill that you really had to work on over time in delivering that information?
I am embarrassed to see, speeches of me, 10 years ago. And look, and in 10 years from now, I may look back at now and be like, oh my God, I can't even look at it anymore. No, it's practice. It's just, public speaking is a skill like anything else. Now, man, I did have some kind of predilection for it. So I was like a theater kid growing up. And so, you have to be comfortable in front of people. But in terms of like being able to communicate well, it's just so much practice. I remember the first talk I ever gave was like this 5-minute, like they gave me this little 5-minute slot, and I got up and I said like the first line and completely went blank, completely forgot where I was, what I was doing in front of like hundreds of people. And so I remember the last line. So I just gave the last line and then ran off. It's terrible. Oh my God, I'll never forget that. But no. So yeah, it's just, you do it a million times. So there's great, what's that? There's an organization that helps you with that.
Toastmasters.
That's
the one.
Yes, you can go to like a Toastmasters club and you just like give little 5-minute presentations in front of the, 10 people. And then like, it's just practice. You just get better at it. You can't help but get better at it. But yeah, it's just practice. And you get to a point, particularly if you really know your talk really well, where you can totally be like giving this really dynamic, passionate speech, and you're seriously thinking about your grocery list. Like you're like, oh shit, I gotta buy avocados, and oh my God, like literally, and you're like, you're doing it, you're dancing around the stage, and you're like totally like somewhere else. It's just, yeah, it's very cool.
So you mentioned that you had, like growing up, you were interested in theater and that sort of thing, and I think that when you deliver information to people, there has to be, and we see this in social media all the time, there has to be a degree of entertainment as well to actually bring people into what you're saying. So is that something that you're like actively seeking to do when you're delivering information, is keep it interesting and keep it, I know you have kind of jokes that you'll throw in there, and you've got sayings that everyone knows, like put it to the test. And I think that kind of helps keep people engaged. Is that intentional, what you're doing there when you're delivering those things?
I wish we lived in a different world. I wish we lived in a world where, look, science matters and just whatever's true is whatever's true. And that's just, people would just do it. Like, that you didn't have to have this kind of patina of, humor or entertainment or anything. It's just like, shouldn't saving the life of your family be enough motivation to, like, do you really need like the little tricks and the juggling to go with it? But that's not the world we live in. Right? The world we live in is, particularly now where we're just hammered at all sides by all sorts of crazy AI slop and God knows what, is that we're in this attention economy, and giving this giving someone some PowerPoint with some bullets and some dry delivery, you could have the most important message in the world, even like selfishly, like that would benefit the person watching, and no one's ever going to hear about you. There's an academic I have tremendous respect for, Noam Chomsky, who's also had a lot of activism in his life. And I remember him saying in an interview once, because he's a terrible speaker, and he acknowledges he's a terrible speaker, and maybe this is just him rationalizing it, but he's like, I'm glad I'm a terrible speaker. Like, I don't want people to listen to me because of like some, it's like, it's the information that should matter, right? And I'm like, yeah, I understand that, but this information is too important to just kind of get lost. And so, if I can find that sweet spot of being something that's, I can make interesting, something that's groundbreaking, something that, that you don't already know, and something that's practical, something you actually do with that information. There's all sorts of cool sciencey stuff all the time, breakthroughs. But unless you can actually like go to your pantry or grocery store and actually do something with it, it's like, well, kind of what's the point? So that's kind of my sweet spot, is trying to find that trifecta. Trying to find something that's important, that I can make interesting, and that is doable, that people can actually, incorporate into their own lives. And often the biggest block, the biggest barrier and all that is certainly not the interesting thing. I mean, there's just every day hundreds of articles on the coolest stuff in all of biology all the time, and nutrition. And certainly not practical. They're talking about foods that regular foods can do. I mean, they're talking about studies of stuff that we could do. It's, can I make it interesting? I mean, so really the block is my ability to make funny enough puns about something, or find some cool kind of detective story twist to make some kind of narrative about how, because I know otherwise no one's going to see it. And it's not like, well, why not just do it anyway? Because I'm afraid someone will see that and see this like really boring lecture piece and be like, oh yeah, I saw that guy once and it was just terrible, right? It was just like, I couldn't watch it. Little do they know that, I also have really fun stuff too, Yeah. So I'm trying to have this baseline level of, can I make this engaging in some way?
Well, that's the art of science communication, right? It's getting people to actually listen to what you're saying, and not just because there's a fine line, like you said. If the information's too boring, people are just going to click off in the first 10 seconds, and then you miss that potential opportunity to impact someone. So it's always, I think, when you are a communicator, there's always that fine line between, still needing to keep it entertaining and informing. And I think you do that, and I think you do that without needing to lean into other avenues. Like, people will be very over dramatic in their claims, hyperbolic. They will maybe attack others, or they will use vitriol in order to bring people into the conversation, as opposed to just using some humor as a way to kind of get people in. So I really like that approach. Getting into more of some of the sciencey topics for the day. So we have a large audience of people who resistance train, who strength train for health, maybe for aesthetics and stuff too. So I wanted to ask you a question about falls. And so falls leading to fractures and other injuries seem quite serious as we age. And so I'm wondering, is preventing fall-related incidents the primary mechanism through which resistance training increases longevity?
Two aspects. Fall prevention. Number one, absolutely resistance, lower limb strengthening exercise that has to be combined with balance training. The combination of balance training and strengthening those lower limb muscles, that's the magic combination. There's been a number of randomized controlled trials show that on average, typically during a year-long study, you can cut fracture rates in half. And that's just during the study. When we've actually had studies which followed people out for 5 years, those who had been previously randomized to combine strength training and balance years before ended up 74% fewer fractures. that beats out any drug on the planet. Nothing is better for fracture prevention than those two critically important pieces. 85% of age-related fracture risk has nothing to do with bone mineral density. You can have the strongest bones in the world, but fall and break your bones. You can have the weakest, most fragile bones in the body and not have a fracture unless you're falling, unless you're injuring in some way. And so it really now, should we still do weight-bearing exercise and stuff to get at that 15%? Fine. But it really is critically important fall prevention. And so it's not just there's other things you can do, like not having slippery rugs and good lighting on your staircases and not going out when it's icy. And I mean, there's just like really basic common sense stuff. But look, you break a hip, have all these downstream terrible consequences. So yeah, anything to do to prevent falls, super important. So glad you brought it up.
For the balance component, could that be accomplished by having people do like unilateral exercises? So when they're maybe, squatting on one leg primarily with the other leg for support, would that accomplish that balance component, or does it need to be more specific?
Most people, we're talking about, people can't even stand on one foot. I mean, forget the squatting. No, I mean, right. I mean, there's some real basics. I mean, in terms of, you mention any aspect of physical fitness, whether it's flexibility, whether it's strength. I mean, people can't even do like the basics kind of stuff, like, touch your toes or anything. So it's like, for most people, just, being able to stand on one foot with your eyes closed, a lot of people can't even do that. And so, I mean, let's start with the basics and then move our way up. But yeah, you don't need the fancy kind of rocker boards and all these fancy equipment. I mean, presumably you tell people, just like you don't need fancy, AI assisted, weight, look, you use body weight, you can use simple things around the house, so you don't have to spend a lot of money to to bring your body into shape.
Great point, and thank you for bringing it back to the practical, because you're right. Some people are starting from a place of a lot of deconditioning, and then they need to just kind of start small with where they're at.
One thing that you see a lot in the older populations as well is bed rest. Has really, particularly for older muscles. They forget the statistic, but now not to age. They did the exact same bed rest exercise with young people and old people, and older people dramatically lost muscle mass way faster. And so bed rest is particularly bad for older muscles for whatever reason. And I forget, it was really a short amount of time too. Like you just restrict someone in bed for a short amount of time, which could be like an illness, a short hospital stay, and they get dramatically deconditioned, which doesn't happen to younger people. Younger people, you can get in a cast, go for a while, you can lose muscle mass, but not like older muscles. So yeah, that's critically important. So we need to try to stay active.
So important to move. A question that I'm not sure if you're aware of any direct research on. As far as I'm concerned, the research generally indicates that larger humans tend to live shorter lives. And so I'm wondering if an athlete who has higher amounts of muscle mass, not we're talking like people who are taking performance enhancing drugs or steroids, but naturally, they're lifting weights, they're healthy, they have a strength training routine, and maybe they have a lower body fat percentage as well if they're paying attention to their diet. Now, for somebody who has maybe more muscle mass on average, whether that be genetics or training for 15, 20 years, is there any sort of protective effect with this muscle mass preventing, sarcopenia, fall risk, blood sugar regulation? Does that kind of offset the fact that this person has a larger BMI, even if they're at like a lower body fat percentage, if it's not taken to the extreme? I'm wondering, basically, if somebody is maybe they're naturally more muscular because they're an athlete.
Yeah, no, so I mean, we're not worried about it. The reason we use BMI, it's kind of a miserable measurement, but it's just because it's so easy. Right? I mean, all you need to know, weight, height, boom, right? You don't have to fancy equipment or something. And so this really, it's a tool to be used in these large studies. I mean, but that's not, something that we are tracking with people. And most critically, it's not, all body fat isn't the same. Sub-Q body fat is basically harmless. It's this visceral fat, this deep fat underneath your abdominal musculature that's coiling around your internal organs or infiltrating your internal organs like your liver and pancreas. That's the dangerous fat. That's what really kills people. And so really, abdominal circumference is more important for longevity than like a BMI measure. And so it's really, what's happening. And so we want to keep our abdominal circumference less than half our height. So you take your height in meters or inches, and you just want kind of measured around your belly button. You want that to be less than half your height. And that is really would determine much better. Now, that's still not the perfect measure. Some people with a lot of abdominal obesity have really kind of droopy abdominal fat. And so you actually do a measurement around the stomach and it actually doesn't capture some of that. So that'd be better kind of on their back where it kind of balances out. Then you can get a better waist circumference measure. Or abdominal circumference measure. But I mean, yeah, so there's kind of better ways. But in terms of, I mean, you may be referring to this data showing that bodybuilders die at ridiculous rates. But, you know, you have to think of all the confounding factors. And so I talk about it, how not to age, like the average life expectancy of bodybuilders is like horrible. Right? I forget what it was, but right? Do you remember offhand? Like,
45, 50, something like that.
Like, what the fuck? Right? Holy shit. Okay. So lots of things come into that. So steroid use.
Mm-hmm.
So this was done at a time where there wasn't like, you know, a kind of a natural bodybuilding movement. And so like everybody was taking steroids. And I'm sure it's super common still to today. And that can have really negative long-term consequences. And so, well, okay, so that could certainly play a role. And, you know, what are people eating? Typical bodybuilder diet.
Lots of animal protein.
Super unhealthy, right? And so they can be slender. You're like, oh, they must have a good diet. But if you're churning through thousands of calories at the gym every day, oh my God, you can eat donuts every day and be skinny as a toothpick. And so you look at somebody and they're like, oh, that doesn't seem like, but oh my God, what is that doing? Ravaging their insides.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's really hard to kind of extrapolate that out. Now, there are some aging pathways, you know, like IGF-1 and mTOR, where there does seem to be this kind of balance between both kind of reproductive health and longevity, as well as kind of maximal muscle hypertrophy and longevity. And there's kind of the seesaw effect. So you can imagine how activating those pathways by eating a lot of leucine or something to maximize muscle fiber formation could have a kind of a negative effect on longevity. So I talk about that a lot in, you know, with the kind of in the protein restriction chapter in How Not to Age, and kind of the balancing of that. But there is lots of beneficial effects of having extra muscle mass. And you talked about one of them, insulin sensitivity, right? Super important. And so, you know, it's very metabolically active tissue. And so, I mean, there's all sorts of benefits. And so encourage people to absolutely resistance exercises along with aerobic, along with all the aspects of fitness, but just not, you know, would not be doing these other things to kind of artificially inflate that beyond something like creatine, which I think may offer some kind of relatively risk-free benefit. But some of these other things, you know, but people, you were, you know, taking scoops of whey protein, it's just like, you know, you're really not doing yourself any favors.
So I have a question kind of related to that. Usually when people discuss limiting protein for longevity, they're kind of in one way or another talking about animal protein, just because when you're looking at population level data, that's usually what people are consuming. So I'm aware that there's some research or a decent amount of research that indicates that plant protein is obviously protective, you know, compared to animal protein, certainly. I'm wondering if, in your eyes, is there for people who are consuming maybe a mostly plant or plant exclusive diet, is there a limit of plant protein? Is there any research indicating this? Is it kind of more speculative? Where's your current thoughts on this idea?
So the benefits of caloric restriction appear to be mostly or exclusively due to protein restriction. And the protein restriction, the benefits of protein restriction, and we're talking about restricting down to the recommended intake, not going lower. You need to hit your targets, but restricting down to recommended levels. The benefits of that is largely or exclusively due to restricting particular problematic amino acids like methionine. So the benefits of protein is really, we're talking about methionine restriction. If we could take it down to one amino acid, because of the most harmful amino acids in excess. Okay, so how do we restrict methionine? Well, we could calorie restrict. If you all of a sudden ate half the food that you ate yesterday, you'll get half the methionine. Regardless of what you're eating, you'll just get half. Okay. Or you eat the same amount of food, but just lower overall protein intake, because that's where the methionine is found, is in the protein. So you could reduce your protein intake. So you're just as full, you're not walking around hungry all the time. Or third, you can maintain the amount of food you're eating and the amount of protein you're eating if you just switch proteins from animal source proteins towards plant source proteins like beans. So legumes tend to be low in methionine on average. So you can eat the same amount of protein without any protein restriction, without any calorie restriction, and dramatically reduce your methionine for all the longevity benefits and all the other anti-cancer benefits, etc., just by switching protein sources over to plant sources. Now, that still didn't answer your question. Your question is, okay, fine, we're doing that. We are switching over to plant protein sources. Okay, then do I have to worry about it? Well, again, why was that plant protein switch good? Because it reduced methionine. So let's say it reduced methionine in half. It doesn't do it that much, but just for easy math. So you reduce your methionine in half. Okay, then what if you eat twice as much plant protein, right? Well, then all of a sudden, it's like eating half as much animal protein, right? Because it's all about methionine restriction. So if you eat twice as much plant protein, so let's say you have veggie burgers, same amount of protein as beef burgers. And so one day you're like, I'm not going to eat a meat burger. I'm going to eat an Impossible burger, a plant-based burger, same amount of protein. All of a sudden your methionine goes way down. Awesome. And then you're like, hey, I don't have to worry about anything because I'm eating plant-based. So I'm eating 2 Impossible burgers. I don't have to worry about protein restriction, right? What did you just do? You just ate the same amount of protein, the same amount of methionine that you had yesterday when you had the beef burger, right? And so now you can say, well, hey, that's great. I got to eat 2 burgers for the same price, same amount. And I didn't bump my methionine up. Okay, yeah, that's great. Certainly better than eating 2 beef burgers, and then you'd be way over it. Okay, but you didn't do yourself any favors in terms of methionine restriction. Yesterday and today, you ate the same amount of methionine. Yes, you got to eat an extra burger. That's awesome if you like burgers, but you didn't get the longevity benefit. And so that's how that plays. So you get the edge by eating plant protein, but that doesn't mean you can eat, you could just have like scoops of, whatever, plant protein isolate and not worry about getting too much methionine for optimal health.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I think the practical take home here for people is to find a kind of in the middle zone that we've been talking about with protein, where they're still getting enough where they're able to put on the muscle mass that's going to be protective as they age, but they're not going so excessive and so far in the other direction, eating more than is necessary, where they're then kind of invoking potentially some of those negative effects. Would you say that that's pretty accurate?
I think the way to do that practically, without needing a calculator, without needing all the put your stuff into some online chronometer kind of thing, is by just not adding protein, getting your protein from whole food sources, right? So I recommend people eat 3 servings of legumes every day, right? So in the morning, you're putting, peanut butter in a smoothie. In the afternoon, you're having some hummus. And in the evening, you're having some black beans on something or whatever, right? So getting your protein from plant sources, 3 servings of legumes a day. So like 3 half cups of regular beans, or you can, however you want to do it, pea soup, whatever. And then just not doing not putting the protein powder, not using these protein isolates. So just sticking to whole food sources of protein, including protein-rich foods throughout your day, is a way that you're going to hit the target without going over, and you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you. One final question, kind of more of a fun one as we wrap things up. Thank you again for your time and all that you do. I know that you're always kind of discovering new foods and new things to add into your regime. I'm wondering if there's any kind of fun meals or new foods that you've been eating recently.
Oh my God, all the time. In fact, there's so many cool new things that I forget, so I'm doing something and then I'll just get out of the habit of something. And then a month later, some new study will come out oh shit, I knew I was supposed to be eating that. And I love eating it. It's not it's just so many cool things you can eat that you just kind of get in the habit of something. Anyway, so something that I'm definitely back on the train. So this is just this week, back on the broccoli sprout train. I mean, broccoli sprouts on a per penny basis have more nutrition than anything else on planet Earth. So for a quart, so you got to grow your own. Otherwise, they're a little more expensive. You take broccoli sprouts, you can get a pound of broccoli sprouts, right? You put a tablespoon in, water, little screen top, it's super cheap, whatever. And then for about 25 cents per cup of finished broccoli sprouts, it's just packed with the sulforaphane, anti-cancer benefits, all sorts of whatever. It's why isn't everybody doing this? It's so ridiculous. The problem is when I travel, you can't travel, right? Because you have to keep rinsing it every day. If you don't rinse it, they can get, gross and slimy and whatever. And so if I'm traveling and it takes a couple days to set you up, blah, blah, blah. But if I'm home there's no reason. Next time you interview, next time we talk, be like, hey, you got some sprouts going on? And I may be like, oh shit, I forgot my sprouts. No, you always got to have sprouts. There's always got to be something in the queue. And then you're left with all these sprouts. You don't want them to go bad. And so then you're forced to like sprinkle them on stuff. And you just find creative ways to add them to stuff. You can put them in smoothies. You can do all sorts of stuff. They're a little spicy to eat just straight. I mean, it's like, oh my God, you get the and it's like equivalent to how many, like wheelbarrows full of mature broccoli. Awesome. Yeah. So anyway, that's one thing. And it's not the most delicious thing in the world, but yeah, super healthy.
We'll get a sprout check next time you're on.
Absolutely.
We'll on that.
Yeah.
Sprout check.
Thank you again for your time, Dr. Greger.
Awesome. Anytime. Keep up the great work.
Great having you.
Bye-bye.